Hey, Composite Gloves here, and today we're going to be going over Iris 2 loading patches. So this is sort of the fastest way to just get up and running with Iris 2, and also loading samples, also saving patches and making it so you don't overwrite patches on accident and creating your own patches. So up here we have our patch selector, and we're actually able to click these up and down arrows and scroll through our patches. However, if you just click on it, it will open up your patch browser and your sample browser as well. There's another way to get to this, and we'll look at that in just a sec. Let's go over this. So here's where your patches will be, and you're able to browse through them by category or patch. So you see here we have bass, keys, leads, pads, rhythm. And what you can do is you can go ahead and just simply click on a patch, and it will load up, and you're able to play it. So it's like, oh, that is a bass patch for sure. Now let's go ahead and look at perhaps a key patch, garble keys. I happen to like the keys section of patches quite a bit. So that is pretty cool. That's how you load up a patch. You'll notice that every time we load up a patch, it'll tell us which of our 4 sample slots are active, right? Because we can only have 4 samples, and you're able to clear or load a different sample. You will also notice that they come with macro controls. So you see here this M1, M4, M7, they come from this macro area right here. And you're able to drag these onto particular controls and give them some amount of control. And your macro knobs are, in this case, right here. You're actually able to get through them through another menu that we'll look at later. But what you could do, and why it's important that they're here, is as we select our patches, we're able to change knobs that have already been mapped to something that is of creative significance and get a quick feel for the patch. So here we have like distortion. Now you'll notice that if I turn this up, it says drive on it. And if I turn it up to 100%, this doesn't mean that the drive will be at 100%. So this purple line right here represents the minimum and maximum I can go. So you see you can go all the way to off, so no drive, and I can only go up to here. I actually can't go up to 100% actual drive. So that is what that deal is all about. And so we can quickly, like, oh, that'd be kind of an interesting thing. Maybe I want a little more aggressive sound. We have delay. We can hear it working. So that's pretty cool. So that's what those are there for. Moving down here, we have this undock icon, which is something that I find pretty useful, but don't use it too often. So I'm able to undock the patch browser as such and move it around like down here. That way I can work on the patch and perhaps browse through patches at the same time. If you're looking for that second macro menu, simply just click right here and bam, they show up. So you're able to do this and mess with them there in the patch, because you might be going, how do I get to these without it being in the patch menu? So that is how you would do that. You're able to import and export and remove presets and patches and such, or not presets and patches, patches and samples and such as well. So, and this method is a little less straightforward than I feel as just going into the actual folders on your computer where they are. Simply delete or remove or augment them there. So that's how you load patches. Now patches, of course, include all the settings that are already on the particular patch, as well as the samples. So every time you save a new patch, so let's say that we made our own patch, we went through here, did some stuff, and we hit save, it would save it along with the relevant samples. So that's kind of cool. So our samples are with our patch. If we hit new, we'll get a little dialog box saying, are you sure you want to start a new patch without saving your settings? So it's going to say, oh, you didn't save. You sure you want to do that? 9 times out of 10, the answer to this question, for me at least, is yes. So I'm going to hit yes, and I'm back to my default menu. Now, you'll notice here that we have samples and oscillator waves that we're able to open. But we have a similar menu, if I close this, right here. And we can switch through this on our various or 4 abilities to load samples, right? So we have 4 slots. This exists on each of them. We have our samples here, and these are the additional libraries that come with Iris 2. And depending on where you put them on your computer, just make sure that you've told Iris 2 where they are. If you've moved them, just come in here and change your library settings down here and tell it where it's at. So I went ahead and downloaded, I believe there's 11 gigs of samples. So it's kind of cool. But when you hear some of them, you're like, I'm not sure I want all of these samples. So what you could do is you can select a genre of sample types that they've deemed. So like they have some ARP Odyssey samples here, which are very useful. And you see they are named along with their notes, which is also very nice. and we can click on one to load one. But let's say that I want to hear it before I load it, which is something you probably want to do. Simply hit, that was substantially louder than I thought. Simply hit preview and it will do so. This is a good time to point out the output knob. So you probably want that down. And so now it's not so ear piercing. These are much lower notes. That was a higher note that I hit. Well, a C5, that's not too high, but anyways, you hear that we can preview it, or we could have it off and just simply go through. Maybe you already have an idea of what they sound like. So you double click it to load it, and there it is. It's all loaded up, and we can go to our next one to load a new one. So we go to our next slot, and you see that we have oscillator waves. You might be going, what are these about? Well, they are just samples still. Their oscillators are just samples. It's all sample based. So very, very cool in some ways. So we have a sine, and we have various types of sine waves, saw waves, triangle, and so forth. You see some of these include mini Moog samples, so you can get a retro feel. They're not going to match the real thing because it's a sample. So, but it's just interesting. You know, the source content you start with is very important. So like, ooh, that is a nice sine wave. See, that started as a sine wave. I don't know what the deal is with some of these. But if we were to load it up and then we're going to mute patch 1, you see that it is indeed a sine wave. It's just very, very low, and some of these aren't pure. So if we wanted to make it pure, we can make a selection with the magic wand and really just get the one part that we want, and even erase some of this. It would be much closer to a sine wave. So you see, we could do that, and you could come in here and make a selection according to your desires. Actually, the frequencies domain selector would be an excellent tool for this. So we could erase our selection, erase it, and select the frequency domain selector and just get that one tone. And we're good to go there. So if their patches or their samples aren't doing it for you, that's a method to doing it. We'll go over the spectral filter area in a future video. So that is pretty cool. Now let's say that you've got a patch, you've loaded up your samples, and you know what you want to do. Now what do I do? Like how do I save it basically? So this star right here means you've augmented the patch in some way. If you click update, it's going to overwrite the current patch. So if you've loaded up a preset and if you've changed some things and hit update, you're going to change that preset patch, which could be a bad thing. Maybe you want to preserve it. If you find yourself constantly changing that patch to be in some other configuration, it may be worth a permanent change. Most of the time, we're probably going to want to hit save to save it as a separate file. So we can hit save, and then we can name our new patch and put it in a category and so on and so forth. I don't want to save this. There's nothing exciting really going on here, but that is what is going on there. So that is loading samples and patches in here, and it's a very quick way to get going. So I could come in here, load up a pad, and let's say artificial voices, and close it. And say, hey, that's really cool, but I want to change the sample on this guy right here. I'm not digging this sample. So I could come into my patch loader, go to sample 1, and click load. And I could come in here and perhaps select a different one. Maybe the reverse teapot would be better suited to my needs, and close it. So there's a whole bunch of ways. You can also scroll through and change your sample. And if you click this little menu here, it brings up the sample menu, and you're able to also scroll through and change your samples here, as well as open up the browser and look through things that way. But this is where having an extra spot to preview samples could be kind of useful. So let's say that, I want to change my sample, but I'm not really sure what I want to hear my sample before because that browser doesn't let you, but you still want to change it. Well, you could come in here and turn on preview in the patch view, and you could come in and say, hey, what's this sound like? What's that sound like? Ambiances are not that loud. Let's go to drones. And you're like, oh, cool, I want that one. And so you'd come in, you could just simply drag this onto there, and you would be able to change your samples. Now, you see me going up here and hitting the stop button inside of FL. That just sends an all notes off command to everything so that things get stopped. But a similar button that does that is the panic button, and it's right here. I just have a habit of reaching for this button because sometimes I have post stuff going on, and this is the button that's going to shut everything up. This button will shut Iris 2 up. So if you're working with Iris 2 in standalone, you would hit the panic button up here. So see, it flushes MIDI data and stops playback of all voices. Like pretty much the same thing. All notes off command. And so that is what that does. If you have any questions, let me know. Subscribe and have a blessed day.